the absolute strongest fragrances from these 10 massive designer brands. That's what we're going to be covering today. There's a lot of weight in this video because these are essentially the gatekeeper brands of the fragrance world, and taking it one step farther, we're narrowing it down to their best performer from each brand. There's a catch here. We're going over only in production fragrances, okay? So no discontinued ones in here, and that would change things. There are a few brands here where some of their discontinued ones would have made it in the video instead. It's a shame that those ended up getting cut off, but that just kind of is what it is. The other thing, we're sticking with designer brands and their designer lines. We're not going into the expensive niche priced lines. That would throw this way off and make it really unobtainable for most people out there. Essentially, we would just be doing a niche video at that point in terms of pricing. So these are all going to be, for the most part, generally speaking, affordable on a designer level, and that's what we're going to be covering. So I will link these all down below, and also I want to point you over to my community tab where I'm doing giveaways and posting deals all the time. So if you're wanting to pick up some rare stuff, that's where you want to be. I also have an emailing list. You can sign up to that and get those deals to your email so you don't miss out. Christian Dior is what we're going to cover first here. And actually this one could have gone a couple of different ways. There's a couple fragrances I was between when choosing ultimately the strongest one from the brand on the designer side of things. And so ultimately I really do think it's probably this one, SAUVAGE ELIXIR. Now it's very tough, and again, one thing I need to point out right now is that it's going to vary from person to person, but also it gets to a point where you really just can't track it much further. So the other one I was up against was DIOR Homme Parfum. That is also a massive scent. I mean, it is strong by every stretch of the definition, but so is ELIXIR. I mean, it gets to a certain point longevity-wise and even projection-wise where you're going to be splitting hairs. Who knows which one's going to edge each other out, but the point is they're both incredibly strong. You just kind of had to pick one because this is going to be easier to get. I just threw this one in. Honestly, though, it could have been a tie. I mean, these both will go and go and go until the point where you just don't want it to go anymore. You're either going to be going to bed or taking a shower or both. So really, they're both ridiculous. That being said, I mean, there's nothing weak about this scent. I mean, it may cause olfactory fatigue to you, so you got to be careful with that. Ultimately, if you want the strongest fragrance from Dior, one that you can get easily, it's going to be ELIXIR. Let's go for MONTBLANC next. Now, MONTBLANC is a great designer brand with a lot of entry-level stuff. You know, the price points are always really competitive, usually in that mid-range designer price point, which is the most competitive price point. It's not cheap. It's not overly expensive. It's a good spot where people feel like they're not going to be getting a cheap piece of garbage, but they're also not spending an arm and a leg. So it really is tough to compete in this price bracket here. Do have a few major brands that do it. MONTBLANC is one of them. But when you step back and look at their performance across a lot of their scents, a lot of them are just okay. So believe it or not, on my skin, the strongest performing in production MONTBLANC fragrance that I have is actually the newer Legend Eau de Parfum. So this beats out Legend Night, it beats out something like Individuel, it beats out something like Explorer even. You know, Explorer, Aventus clone, a lot of Aventus clones are beast mode. Explorer isn't one of them though. It's kind of more so on the average end of things. This one to me is the best performer out of the entire brand, which is kind of crazy. You know, I look through everything and this is it right here. It's kind of surprising. You know, this has violet leaves, it's got oak moss, woods, a little bit of leather. It's Legend, right? Nothing that's going to blow you away, but it is a really good performer for a pretty low cost. Let's go and hit Giorgio Armani up next. Now, this one also was a little bit tough. There are a lot of pretty heavy performers in the brand here, and when I stepped back and looked at everything, this one probably takes the cake. It's Armani Code Profumo. So, I mean, even over something like Stronger With You intensely or absolutely, this one still does better on my skin, believe it or not. Now we're talking Parfum versus Parfum. You know, Absolutely is a Parfum. Armani Code Absolute is also a Parfum, also a great performer. There's a lot of great performers. And again, it gets to the point where you're splitting hairs. Maybe some things will work better on your skin than Profumo. But for me, and just kind of, I would say generally speaking, this is probably going to be one of your best bets if all you care about and all you're after, first and foremost, is going to be massive performance. Now, even in the Acqua di Gio line, there are a few really good ones. Profumo, Acqua di Gio Profumo, also a Parfum, always had consistently really solid performance from that one. Even something like Acqua di Gio Absolute does pretty good. There's quite a few, but they don't really get close to this one. This stuff is strong. It's got tonka bean, leather, vanilla to some slight extent. More so it's going to be a sweet, almost root beer fizzy scent. Definitely going to be for the younger crowd if you are kind of into the sweeter, newer men's style scent. This is going to be it. Definitely nothing shy of just beast mode about this one. Up next, we have Yves Saint Laurent. So definitely not going to be La Nuit de l'Homme or L'Homme, right? None of those in either of those lines actually really fit the bill, which is a shame. I wish there were some more in those lines that had really, really good performance. But when you take a look at most of them, again, in production-wise, a lot of them are just okay. I even think Old Team was one of the better performing ones a lot of the time. Nice fresh rose, but that's discontinued. So that kind of leads us to jump over to the Y line, and when you factor in everything, performance from projection and longevity, I think the Eau de Parfum takes the cake. This is kind of the strongest one in terms of their broadly marketed men's designer fragrances. This is it right here. I mean, gosh, this thing is just so strong. It goes and goes and goes. It's going to be on the sweeter side. It's a sweeter blue fragrance, so you have to be careful with it in the high heat. It can kind of get a little bit too much for some. You can limit your sprays and get away with it easier, but be warned with that. For me, it doesn't stop me. I wear this one in the summer all the time, and I love it. But what's nice is it has so much performance behind it that you can wear it in the cold, and it still holds up great. It's a nice, refreshing one in the cold as well. It has a little bit more of a crisp smell, and the cold air tames some of the sweetness, so it works great. If you're after performance, and for that matter, compliments of versatility, you got to go for Eau de Parfum. I think pretty much every guy should have a bottle of this on hand. Next up, we have Versace. So this is kind of the other brand I was kind of thinking about when talking about mid-range designer pricing. You know, typically a lot of their stuff will be in the $45 to $55 range with some exceptions. This one is a little bit of an exception currently because it's highly concentrated and it's also the newest. However, it is the strongest, and it's EROS Parfum. So I was kind of between this and something like Dylan Blue, and again, it's really close actually. Dylan Blue, surprisingly, is incredibly strong. You know, Versace Pour Homme itself is not. So you might think, oh, Dylan Blue, it kind of looks to be a flanker of that. Is it any good? Is it going to be as strong? It's significantly stronger. But EROS Parfum, being that it leans heavily sweeter, you know, more tonka, more vanilla, just more going on in the base, has more substance. This one takes the cake, but again, it is still pretty close, and it might depend person to person. Now, I think EROS Parfum is great, not only because of that performance, but because in terms of a flanker, this one's a little bit more refined. It's a little bit more interesting to me. It's a little bit more quote-unquote mature. Now, this DNA is still pretty far from mature itself, but when you compare this to the EDT or Flame or even the Eau de Parfum, it's the most well done to me. It's the most polished, and the performance is a bonus. But if you're after the performance first and foremost, go for this one here for sure. And again, Dylan Blue also would really get the job done for you. That one's a little bit fresher, but actually it still does have some sweetness too. So it just depends on what you're going for here. Now, PACO Rabanne is a designer brand that has a ton of beast mode scents. I mean, they are known for being pretty loud and pretty obnoxious, both in their scents, but also even to some extent their presentation. A lot of the pushback is from the Invictus trophy-shaped bottles and even the 1 million gold bars, right? It's something that really gets people talking for good or for bad. And again, loud in both aspects here. A lot of great performers. Now, at one point, it would have been Invictus Aqua 2016. I mean, that stuff will last through a shower. It will last through swimming and in the lake and that sort of thing. Very strong stuff. But we don't have that anymore. We don't even have the 2018 anymore, which was weaker. And, you know, like a 1 million Privé could have probably been a runner-up for this. But in terms of what they're producing right now and current formulations and all that stuff, I do believe it to be 1 million ELIXIR. I think this is even stronger than 1 million Parfum, although, again, it could be close. I think it's stronger than Lucky as well. Lucky has a little bit more of a freshness to it, actually. This one, very heavy on the vanilla, tonka. It has a lot of notes that are typically known for being tied to strong performing fragrances because these type of compounds will just last forever. And really, though, again, with PACO Rabanne, you don't have to put as much pressure on that. I mean, if you go for most of them, they're going to be good performing. If you just kind of put them all on a dartboard and threw a dart at it, you're likely to land on a really good performer. So you don't have to stress about that one too much like maybe some other brands. And this one here could potentially be another brand that you might have to worry about a little bit, and that's AZZARO. So another one that's kind of right there on the edge of cheapy / mid-range. You've got a ton of chromes, which kind of land in the cheapy category, and a lot of those are pretty weak. You know, the original chrome, it does okay. It's not a beast mode scent, but it's cheap. You know, Chrome Extreme is actually pretty good, but that one's actually around $45, kind of working into the mid-range. So what could it be? What's their strongest one? Again, I was kind of up against a couple. You know, there are a few that do really well. Ultimately, though, it ended up landing on the AZZARO Wanted line, and in more specific, we have the Most Wanted. Not the Most Wanted Parfum, believe it or not, but the Most Wanted. So this one's got toffee, it's got cardamom, it has amberwood. It's the only 3 notes that they actually list off, and it's a pretty good representation. Sweet, gourmand, and really, really nice and rich, deep. You know, it has a lot going on here beyond just those notes. More sweetness to it. There is a vanilla to my nose and some woods as well. So you get quite a bit out of this one, even though it might not look like it. And I do think it's a good flanker. Actually, in terms of scent, I've talked about this before, I would probably take the Most Wanted Parfum over this one. And not for nothing, the Most Wanted Parfum is a great performer. But like I said, for whatever reason, on my skin, this one actually does better. And it even does better than Wanted by Night, which in and of itself is also a great performer. Again, you can probably go with any of those 3 and be perfectly satisfied. But this one does tend to do the best on my skin on a consistent basis. Up next, we have Salvatore Ferragamo, another one that's kind of cheap into mid-range, depending on what you get. And they've got a lot of great fragrances. Quite a few of my favorite designers come from this brand, especially when I'm talking about an affordability aspect. Some are better than others in terms of performance. And again, I was between a couple here. It was a little bit tough, and again, it's probably splitting hairs. Ultimately, I actually landed on the original UOMO, which has always been incredibly strong. So it was between, I guess, technically 3. The original UOMO, UOMO Signature, and then Ferragamo F Black, which also is very strong. F Black, you know, it's fresh spicy, essentially is what it is. You got a lot of tonka bean, but it's a fresher, powderier tonka bean mixed with a ton of black pepper. You know, it's a different take on it. It's very masculine, essentially. It's kind of the complete opposite to Ferragamo UOMO. But what UOMO has that F Black doesn't is just the overwhelming amount of sweetness. You got a bunch of sweet notes, tonka bean of the sweeter variety, a ton of ambroxan. You know, it kind of has this gourmand dessert smell to it as well. And this one even does better again than UOMO Signature in terms of performance. It just has so much impact and power. It's so potent that it just works. But I really like it a lot. You know, it's actually one of my favorites. And scent-wise, I often do find myself actually reaching for this over UOMO Signature as well, although from a scent standpoint, Signature is probably easier to get down with for a lot of people because it's not quite as overwhelmingly sweet, even though, again, I love this original overwhelmingly sweetness, but it also happens to be the better performer here, at least on me. Running down to the very end, from Victor and Rolf, it ended up, of course, being SPICEBOMB Extreme. Now, they don't have a ton of fragrances for men right now. I mean, really, they're only known for, in production-wise, the Spice Bombs, right? For men, that's all they have. And Night Vision EDP is a great performer. The original Spice Bomb still can really hold its own on my skin. Infrared does a decent job. It's, you know, nothing really comes close to Extreme, though. Vanilla, tobacco, and black pepper. It's going to be still very fresh, spicy off the top, but then you're immediately getting a lot of sweetness in the base, and this one will stick around for a very long time. You know, I just think this one deserved a mention because it's a designer brand that, again, doesn't have a ton of fragrances out there for men, but they still maintain an incredible relevance. I mean, take a look. I mean, a lot of these designer brands, AZZARO and even DIOR and that sort of thing, have a ton of fragrances. Armani, bigger brands with more fragrances, but SPICEBOMB and SPICEBOMB Extreme and even Night Visions are talked about all the time as well. That's pretty impressive, and it's very deserving of this spot. Next up, last up actually, we have Givenchy. Now, similar deal where they're pretty much known for the gentleman and gentlemen line. And I think their strongest is actually their newest, which is, again, pretty crazy. It's Eau de Parfum Reserve Privé. I've talked about it a million times. You've heard enough of it. It's got chestnut, whiskey, nice sweet iris, chocolatey accord in here. Oh, this is it. This is how a flanker should be done. and I just couldn't be happier with this one. Has even better performance than the Eau de Parfum. It's got better performance than some of the fresher iris ones like Gentleman Eau de Toilette Intense, which actually has really good performance. This one does better. There's a whole lot of richness and depth and heaviness in the base of this scent where it just sticks around forever, and it even has good projection too. Alrighty guys, there you go. 10 of the strongest performing fragrances from these 10 huge designer brands. You know, there were a few brands that were missing. Dolce & Gabbana and even a huge brand like Chanel was missing. You know, Chanel doesn't have a ton of really strong fragrances unless you went with like Antaeus or something, and most of you guys probably wouldn't want to wear that. Dolce & Gabbana, you know, you could go for one of the exclusive editions and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I think when it comes to spending your money and putting performance first, these brands are going to have your back compared to some of the others out there. Links will be down below. That's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you tomorrow for another one. Take care.